The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are of those individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, Concordant Body, Appendant Body, Masonic Authority, or CraftsmanOnline.com.
Welcome back to the Craftsman Online podcast, the only Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge in New York. I'm your host, Right Worshipful Brother Michael Arce. Man, we are midway through the month of May. Dude, I cannot wait for summer to get here because this July 4th, I'm sure you've heard, something big going around the country. It's called America 250. We're going to be celebrating the 250th year of American independence, and a part of that is what our guest this week will be diving into. But first, we want to say thank you to all of our new subscribers on Patreon. Yeah, helping out that Craftsman Online podcast with a $5 a month pledge. You get ad-free episodes and access to a full back catalog of subscriber extra episodes. I mean, it's like another season or two just on its own for just $5 a month. See if it's a good fit for you. The 7-day free trial link is right there in the notes for this episode. Worshipful Brother Gordon Moccio is the past master of Kisco Lodge number 708 in Mount Kisco, New York, and he is the author of a new Masonic book, By the Signs We Know Them, Masonic Bonds in the Civil War. His book covers many of the battles in the war between the states. Worshipful Brother Gordon, welcome to the Craftsman Online podcast.
Brother Mike, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to have an opportunity to speak to your audience.
The reason why I had you come on the podcast, and it's not just because you're a brother and you've wrote this amazing book, it's the subject of the book. Because my mother lodge has a fascinating story that relates to the war between the states. And I have heard so many, and you've probably seen it too, like Masonic myths about how did brothers really treat each other during this important time of American history. But before we get to that, I'd like to kind of get a high-level overview because you did a lot of research into this story that you provide. The collection of stories that you provide, I think, is fair. Give us a little look of like what life was kind of like for Americans and Freemasons in that, 19th century era where you had about 300,000 Freemasons in a country with a population of about 31 million.
Well, in the years leading up to the Civil War, to be a man and a Mason meant living by a clear set of values, if you will. America was growing quickly, but it was also becoming more divided politically, socially, geographically. By that I mean we were always, attaining new territories, and Masonry gave men a stable moral framework at a time when the nation itself was anything but stable and would become even more unstable. A Mason was expected to be honorable, disciplined, and measured in his conduct. To coin a phrase, a man's word was indeed his bond. Within the lodge, men who might disagree bitterly on politics or the future of the country met as equals. This is very important. Void of political or sectarian discussion. In a way, Masonic lodges were places for social networking before the concept even existed.
I know that you and I are not the first Masons to have heard these amazing stories that came out from Union and Confederate soldiers and Freemasons during the war between the states, which definitely makes for some great fodder for a book. And I'd like to highlight a few of these during our conversation. In the beginning of the book, you talk about the temporary ceasefire that took place with the Union Army so that a soldier could get his Master Mason's degree.
A Union soldier was concerned he would not survive the war to become a Master Mason. Now imagine that. Imagine the craft having that much of a hold and that much of an impression on a young soldier that in this, in this moment, Masonry was foremost in his mind. So communicating through non-traditional methods, using Masonic signs, words, and modes of recognition that every Mason, North or South, knew, a temporary ceasefire was agreed upon, of course, under a flag of truce, and to fulfill their obligation and raise this young soldier to the sublime degree of Master Mason. Most non-Masons, and I don't know how they pulled this off, but most non-Masons didn't even know these meetings or degree conferrals were happening. Uh, when Masons on opposing sides agreed to pause the fighting, it was usually done very quietly under the pretext of a flag of truce to recover wounded or bury the dead, or only a handful of officers uh, actually knew the real reason.
You hit a really good point, because that's the part that I've always questioned, where in our ritual, and we're not here to give away any of that, but we do say there's certain signs that we can show so that somebody can see it and identify us as a Mason in the dark or in, light, daylight. And I was always like, oh yeah, okay. And they're like, oh yeah, well, during the Civil War, there's this story. And then someone always tells you some story and you're like, okay, well, that seems kind of believable. But you got to a really good point where you had layers upon layers. And this is what I find so interesting, is that you had people who picked up arms to go fight against their neighbors or even family members for a belief or value system that they were very strong, they held very strongly. But then at the same time, they would have on the opposition somebody who was a Masonic brother who they may or may not know and say, well, I'm going to stop fighting for a moment and go to a meeting to do a degree with somebody, and we can be brothers in Masonry and then go back to fighting. And to me, that is really hard to fathom all of that.
These men took their obligation seriously, or these brothers took their obligation seriously. Of course, by day, our brethren fought each other fiercely and with deadly force. But under a flag of truce, they would gather and perform their Masonic duties and obligations. From a moral perspective, Masonic principles went with them onto the battlefield. We believe in Freemasonry. One's life may be taken, but a Freemason's integrity never. It was a profound moral conflict. Our brethren were torn between loyalty to their uniform and loyalty to the craft. Think about that. And in those moments of humanity, the brotherhood they shared outweighed the war that divided them.
If you're a history nerd, this is your year. Our country is celebrating 250 years of American independence. We're hearing all of these great stories, and Worshipful Brother Moccio has put them together in his latest book, By the Signs We Know Them, Masonic Bonds in the Civil War. You can get it on Amazon, and the link is right there in the notes for this episode. As we've touched on, there are so many great Civil War stories. I got to say, one that was absolutely new to me that I can't wait for you to share with our listener is Morgan's Raid. What can you tell us about this? Because I had no idea that there is most of us think a raid is something quick, like it's maybe a day. This went for a month and a half during the summer of 1863, and they traveled from, Kentucky into deep Ohio?
Yes, and you're right. We consider raids to be quick, and they were quick, but they covered a lot of ground. And these quick raids lasted a long time until Morgan and his men were eventually caught. June to July 1863 was was the longest cavalry raid of the entire Civil War. Now, of course, it was led by Confederate and brother General John Hunt Morgan. Roughly 2,400 cavalrymen crossed from Tennessee into Kentucky, then swept north into Indiana and deep into the Ohio Valley. Now, John Hunt Morgan, a brigadier general and Freemason raised in Kentucky, he didn't attend West Point, which made him more of a risk taker and less of a tactician. Morgan was a charismatic, bold, and somewhat unconventional cavalry commander, a sort of rebellious maverick of his day. Morgan inspired fierce loyalty, and he demanded fierce loyalty among his men. Morgan was the type of leader who led from the front, making him a model cavalryman, and his unit was one of the most effective raiding forces in the Western theater. Raiding forces, unlike standard units who travel heavily and hold their ground, a raiding unit relies on mobility and the element of surprise. Raiding units travel light, no wagons, few supplies. They're designated for speed, disruption, and psychological impact. Whatever supplies they needed, they got along the way. Morgan was also impulsive and often disobeyed orders. At times, he let his ambition take control. Now, an example of this is his decision to cross into Indiana and Ohio in 1863, directly defying General Bragg's orders. Morgan's goal was bold. He wanted to divert Union troops, spread panic across the Midwest, and disrupt Northern logistics during the heart of the 1863 campaign season. The raid lasted about 6 weeks and covered nearly 1,000 miles. Morgan's men destroyed railroad tracks, seized supplies, and forced local militias into skirmishes across dozens of towns. The deeper they rode into Union territory, the more exhausted and isolated they became. And by late July, Union cavalry cornered them in eastern Ohio. Most of Morgan's command was captured at Buffington Island along the Ohio River, and Morgan himself was taken near Lisbon, which is now Lisbon, Ohio, on July 26, 1863. Though strategically unsuccessful, the raid had huge psychological impact. I mean, Midwesterners, especially civilians, had never seen a Confederate troop, some of them, especially this far north. And it tied down tens of thousands of Union troops who might have been used elsewhere.
Now, is this a story, and maybe I got this mixed up a little bit, but I remember there was one story where during a raid or during a conflict, the brothers were purposely trying to not harm the property or the people that were known to be Freemasons, and they were marking their property so that they knew the Masons were there.
That is exactly right. And as a matter of fact, Freemasons would mark their property. Someone would put a square and compass on their property. Others would mount whatever Masonic paraphernalia they had. And there was one instance where Morgan pulled up at the residence of a doctor who was a Mason, and he fully intended to loot the doctor's properties and take whatever horses and supplies he could muster. But the doctor transmitted to him that he was indeed a brother, and Morgan gave the order to ride on.
During America 250, I know that brothers are looking for other things to talk about. Of course, the independence and the revolution of 1776, amazing. But as we point out, it's 250 years of our American story that we're talking about during this year. And I certainly feel that by the signs we know them, your book, The Masonic Bonds and the Civil War, definitely there's some stories that will be very interesting for Lodge brothers to hear. I mean, we can't do a Masonic podcast without talking about a couple of them. The next one that I wanted to touch was the Battle of Gettysburg. In your book, you talk about it being the largest, bloodiest, and most likely to everyone, we know this battle. I think we all grew up in that generation. We had to memorize the Gettysburg Address when we were growing up as kids. I still hope that that's something they do today, but I wonder. But you have a couple stories that I wanted to touch on because we're moving up the timeline to July of 1863. And there was a story that I was really moved by the note that read, quote, "Buried as a brother, may he rest in the eternal East," end quote. That's definitely a Mason.
Yes, and it is also one of the most emotional Masonic stories. On July 2nd and 3rd, 1863, a fallen Union soldier, a Master Mason, was found by Confederate troops who recognized a Masonic sign or symbol on his person. Despite enemies on the field hours before, these Confederate Masons performed a Masonic burial for the brother. They placed a handwritten note on his body: "Buried as a brother, may he rest in the eternal East." In Masonic language, as you are aware, the eternal East symbolizes the afterlife, light, truth, and peace after the labors of life are complete. Now, the note later reached Union lines and allowing his lodge brothers to learn that even in death, far from home, he did not die without his brothers being present, and he was treated with dignity by men wearing the opposite uniform. Now, again, think about that. I mean, he was treated with dignity by the same men he was fighting fiercely with earlier.
Well, and it's also a great level of comfort to the family that's going to know this because they, God forbid, don't want to be thinking of, face down in the dirt with the bayonet going through him. There's some of the violent ways that people were killed back then. But to know that, as you point out, he's surrounded by love, even though that love came from those that he was fighting that same day. Just these Masonic stories, that being the mystic tie and that deep bond that goes beyond country and all and feelings and it's amazing. It gives you a lot of hope for any problems that we're going through today.
Just talking about this, I have chills.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how much this research and writing this book affected me.
That's your book is more than just cool stories. We've heard a lot of these, whether just being fans of history or being Freemasons, but it was also, yes, the research that you went into. I wanted to touch on another letter, and this one was from Brother Grady. And this came during the Siege of Petersburg, which you detail in the book as like the longest engagement during the Civil War. And the line that got me from that is kind of the same theme that we keep touching on with this book, where he says, quote, "Though the war taught us division, the craft reminded me of unity," end quote.
What Brother Grady was saying is that Freemasonry didn't change because the country fractured. Masonic principles were still alive, even on the field of battle. When he encountered a fellow Mason, even when wearing a different uniform, the obligations of the craft overrode the hostilities of the battlefield. So, to me, the words spoken by Brother Grady speak to three powerful truths. One was what war divides, Masonry unites. Under the darkest of circumstances, Masons recognized each other as brothers first and soldiers second. The principles of Freemasonry weren't theoretical, they were lived. Sharing rations, providing aid and comfort to wounded brethren, carrying wounded enemies and brothers to cover, transporting brothers who were wounded back to the respective lines, refraining from firing on a brother because he was wearing a square on compass prominently, ensuring that a mortally wounded brother's final moments were not spent alone, burying deceased brethren with dignity. Freemasonry proves that the human bond can outlast political or military divisions. Brother Grady witnessed the worst of war, yet Freemasonry reminded him of the best of humanity. The nation was tearing itself apart, but the Masonic bond was steadfast.
There's a thread that can be connected here because my mother lodge, St. George's Number 6 in Schenectady, New York, was warranted back in 1774. So it's older than the U.S., where it's referred to as a colonial lodge. But one of our great stories is a Civil War story, which is the day that the war stopped, where we still travel down to St. Francisville, Louisiana, which is the worst time to visit. I think it's like June or July. It is hotter than 3 hells down there, dude. It's like 3 shower a day weather. It is so gross. But this little tiny town and the brothers of this lodge, they keep this story alive with a reenactment. And it's the story of a brother from my lodge in Schenectady. And it's really funny when you go down south and you hear Southerners try to pronounce our New York town names. That's a treat just in itself. But the story goes is that the captain, he contracted malaria, and eventually he committed suicide because he just went crazy from the malaria. And the same town that he was literally shelling days, weeks before, he is buried in the church, in the cemetery, where the church has the cannon holes from where he was shooting cannonballs from his ship during the raids. That's where this brother is buried. And the cool thing is, as you had kind of mentioned, how did the Masons identify each other? And it's by the certain signs that we know them to be, just like your book. Flying the flag of truce to say, hey, we want to come ashore to bury our captain. The Confederate soldiers allowing that to happen. The Union soldiers at the time, some of them giving the all-hailing sign of Masonic distress. The Confederate soldiers recognizing that we're brothers. Them having a little quorum between the quorum and saying, yeah, we'll stop fighting for a day to give this brother a Masonic burial, pulling together the resources to do that, doing it, saluting each other, walking back to their respective sides, having a cool off day, and then going back to hearing that story. It became less of a myth and more of a dream to know that people could be that opposed but united under the craft.
Look at the friend-to-friend Masonic Memorial in Gettysburg. I mean, there are. When I first went to Gettysburg, I can remember the weekend fell on the same. It was an actual date of the Gettysburg Address. So Gettysburg was packed, and they had on the day of the address, they had a parade. And they had Union soldiers, Confederate soldiers, and the brothers that were playing the Confederate soldiers, they were from indeed down south. And as the parade was continuing, I was wearing, of course, a little bit of Masonic regalia. I had my square and compass hat on, and I have to tell you, they were going by me and they were acknowledging me as only Masons can, and it was really it was really a fun time. And then bringing up the rear, of course, was an actor portraying Abraham Lincoln, and we followed them to the point of the speech. And after that, after he gave the speech, we went to, and this was extremely touching to me. It was sundown. We went to Little Round Top, and from Little Round Top, you can see the entire battlefield. And they had a band, a Union band, playing the popular songs of the day that you immediately recognize, especially guys like us that have been around a while, from playing in all the old westerns, so on and so forth. And after they played their first song, the onlookers there erupted in applause, and the band leader quieted everyone down and said, "Thank you very much, but tonight we play for them." And that was their performance was followed by taps. And let me tell you something, my brother, There wasn't a dry eye on the field.
It's very easy to recommend By the Signs We Know Them by Worship Brother Gordon Moccio for you or your lodge to get a copy of to share during this America 250. There was another story you got to where there's a very loose Masonic connection. And I know we had talked about Brother Gordon is retired now. So as I like to say, he's living the dream. And besides writing books and still being active in his lodge, he also hosts a podcast about politics and with a focus on encouraging discourse and having conversations and working through it. So with that lens in mind, you got into the surrender with Grant and Lee at the Appomattox Courthouse. Lived in Northern Virginia, still can't say it. And we know that, Grant and Lee, they were not Freemasons, but the battle and everything that happened at Appomattox has been highly documented. And one of the lines that you quoted is where you said, when Grant says to Lee, let's rebuild this country together. And in that America 250 lens, we know that Freemasons were present in the building of our country in 1776 and also throughout everything that led up to the Civil War. What are your thoughts as a Mason that comes to mind when you hear the leadership of two men coming together and saying, okay, we're going to do this together?
It was totally out of character for Grant. I mean, Grant sent word to Lee that he wanted to meet, and Lee responded immediately and said, sure, I'll meet you. Now, Lee was relatively close by, and for those who don't know, Appomattox Courthouse was not a courthouse, it was a town. And Lee rode to Appomattox Courthouse, and he was met by a contingency of Union and a Union advance team who asked him, where do you want to meet? And Lee said, hey, listen, we need to let's find a suitable location. Grant, on the other hand, was coming from a ways away. He, like I said, Lee reached there first. Grant was fighting a migraine. He had to travel several miles over muddy, congested roads, and it was not the ideal for Grant. So the home of Wilmer McLean was eventually selected because it was well maintained, undamaged, and close to the village's center. Lee and Grant would meet in the parlor of that residence about 1 p.m. And Lee was always very, very the model soldier. He had his white horse. His uniform was pristine. He marched in there with confidence, and in walks Grant. And Grant, he's got a stogie in his mouth. He's wasn't properly dress uniform, and looked like he's been riding the trail, which he did. And like I said, about 1 p.m. they met, and the two exchanged subtleties. And then Lee asked Grant, he said, well, you know why I'm here? What are the terms for surrender? And 7 words were, in fact, if you have a passion for this, another tearjerker. He said, no terms. Let's rebuild this country together. Now, one may have expected that there'd be thunderous applause, and when the Union soldiers fought, they'd be not with Grant. Grant ordered them. There'll be no celebration, no cheering, no hazing, no gloating. So the Confederates could surrender with dignity. And what's remarkable about that is, amid the stacked rifles and folded flags, old friendships were rediscovered, and new ones were born. For many soldiers, it became a different kind of celebration, not of victory, but relief. and the chance to start again and go home. Now, the conduct that day echoed the teachings of Freemasonry: respect for a defeated opponent, compassion rather than humiliation, and perhaps the greatest display of leadership came in the final moments when Grant, the victor, and Lee, the defeated, met as men, upright men, to heal a broken nation. After 4 years of brutal division, they showed that reconciliation is indeed possible. And with just 7 words, the war was over.
I really appreciate you sharing this book with me, sharing your story with our listener. Hopefully some of them are like, hey, I want to get this and I want to be able to do lectures or give a program or give a report in their lodge meeting. And to get his book, if you're listening to us on your podcast player, just pop it open. You'll see the link to get to the By the Signs We Know Them on Amazon, or you can search for it by its name, By the Signs We Know Them, by Worshipful Brother Gordon Moccio.
Thank you, my brother. It's been a pleasure discussing this with you, and I can't thank you enough for the opportunity.
Thanks again to my guest this week, Worshipful Brother Gordon Moccio, Past Master, Kisco Lodge, number 708 at Mount Kisco, New York. His book is By the Signs We Know Them, Masonic Bonds in the Civil War. And if you're interested in getting a copy, open up the notes for this episode to buy that book on Amazon. I'm Right Worshipful Brother Michael Arce. I am always looking for our time together. And next week, if you know what CMAC, Oodala, McPeepee, JJ did tie buckle, if you know what all those phrases are, well, you are really going to dig our next episode. If not, I hope you like it even more, as we learn to lead your lodge like a Marine with our guest Worshipful Brother Jesse Wallet, a major in the United States Marine Corps. That's on Monday. Until then, let peace and harmony prevail.